Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gomes. I'm a Vedic astrologer of some 35 years, and I have I'm going to do a lecture today at 1 o'clock on Gemini astrology. If anyone can make it, that's great. It's the actual website, ACVA. If you can make it, this may be too late. I believe they may have recordings of the session available to people who subscribe. So that's always an option. But this will be on Gemini astrology, which is a special sub-branch of Vedic astrology, and which I've studied for many, many years. I don't claim to be an expert. This is an introductory class, and so I just thought I'd let you know about that. I'm going to try to make this presentation this week, or this show this week, as tight as possible because I have to be on within about an hour. So this is going to be a little bit briefer than normal. I keep saying that every week. The past couple of weeks, I have managed to do that. This week, I'm under a time constraint, so I have to do that. And let's see uh, what else I can tell you. Oh, yes, please like, subscribe. We're really close to 1,000 subscribers now, which is great. For me, and maybe we can start to monetize the page and improve the site for you folks. I will have a guest on next week, a colleague of mine from Lebanon who's been on before, John Karazian, going to do a special show. This won't be telecast. This will be on YouTube though. And let's see now. And if you want to contact me for a reading or for lessons, please text me or email me. You can text me at 508-525-0001. That's 508-525-0001. And you can email me at garygomesg@gmail.com. And so that's Gary Gomes, the letter G at gmail.com. Okay, so without further ado, let's look at this week's chart. I might look at the United States or President Trump's chart just briefly, but I may not. I may just stick with the actual chart that I have on screen. So let's go over here to the share screen, and we're going to share it. And it took right away. What a miracle. Okay, so this is, since I'm broadcasting irregularly at pretty much the same time I was last week, this is still um, a um, a Jupiter rising chart, but there's something special about it this week. And that is we have um, Jupiter in the first house in Venus's sign, and Venus is in the 11th house in Jupiter's sign. So they call that a Parivarna yoga. So there's an exchange of rulers. Alan Anand has written a very good book on that. I might as well give Alan a free plug. And so Parivarna yogas are special combinations in the chart. They strengthen both the planets and the houses in which they occur. Jupiter is actually pretty strong because number one, it's retrograde. Number two, it's right in the middle of the sign. Planets in the middle of the sign tend to be the strongest. Retrogrades act in kind of unpredictable ways, though. They act so there's what I want to call a repeating quality to retrogrades. And that is, you don't go through a process once, you go through it like two or three times to uh, see what's developing. So we're having I would say sort of a repeat of what happened in 2017 with the first Trump presidency, and I'll explain what that means and how this chart reflects that. So we have, um, and again, obviously, as you know, a lot of people are happy that Trump is president. A lot of people are unhappy that Trump is president. They tend to divide strongly, but not universally, along party lines. And I think in this particular chart, we have Jupiter as ruler of the 11th house and the 8th house, giving some behind the scenes intrigue to what's happening. And Venus is in the 11th house, but it also rules the 6th house of enemies. And Venus is exalted, it's in its best possible sign. It's also with Rahu, which frustrates, it listens to Venus, but it frustrates Venus just a little bit. And there is a Moon Venus conjunction. Saturn is in the 10th house, so that means progress on either side will go slowly. And the Sun and Mercury are in the 9th house, which goes back to the 4th house. So the status of government, you're seeing a struggle for the status of government right now. And what I mean by that is you're seeing a fight to kind of dislodge, um, depending on your perspective, either the old guard or people who aren't loyal to Donald Trump. So it depends on your perspective as to how you view this. I think so. That's why we've seen the security details taken away from people um, who, quite honestly, were unfriendly to Trump. And but also they're very costly. These security details are very costly. Um, so Mars is, if you look carefully, Mars is aspecting that Sun Mercury conjunction. So the Sun is in a traditional sign, but it's being attacked by Mars, and it'll continue to be attacked by Mars really until July. So this isn't going to go away anytime soon. Excuse me. And the other thing that's happening with this combination, and again, this is true not only in the United States, but if you look at the news of the world, you'll see certain things happening in Germany, certain things happening in England, certain things happening even in China and Japan. So we tend to stay focused on our own country over from the United States. But you also see things happening in Canada, uh, 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 where it looks like be another government in a few months. And um, so without, so it seems like things are becoming more conservative. Um, and this is a disruptive presidency. Uh, if we look at the Taurus rising sign over here, if so, I might as well use Gemini indicators. Uh, Taurus is aspecting, Jupiter's aspecting Capricorn, Venus, Moon, and Mars, and K2 are all aspecting each other. And also we have, if we look at the regular Parashari aspects, Mars is aspecting Mercury. So whenever there's a Mars K2 or a Mars Mercury aspect, or whenever K2's in the mix, things really won't go according to plan. There'll be disruptions. There'll be um, not necessarily falsehoods, but attempts to undercut the progress or the intentions of a person. I read just the other day, there's already a petition circulating to have Trump impeached. So this is like within, um, basically within 1.5 weeks of his presidency, of his assuming the presidency. And it's about the idea that he uh, made money from having the Mar-a-Lago the documents at Mar-a-Lago. I think that's the foundation of it. And who knows how far it'll go. Uh, it certainly will not make its way through the House, not currently. Um, so it's one of those things that is symbolic, but like I said, it's already an indicator of a starting of attempts to undercut the administration. As a matter of fact, those attempts were made even before Trump took office, and there have been some successful attempts to block what Trump has wanted to do. But I think what we're seeing this kind of like push me, pull you kind of phenomenon happening around the world. If I look at Italy, Italy wants to do things um, that the European Union is saying it can't do. And in regards to immigration policy, um, trade policy, with Venus exalted as it is, trade policy will certainly come under focus. Um, Saturn is now direct. It moved direct to it a few days ago, and that will actually mean some progress will actually start to be made in terms of setting up appointments and and confirming cabinet members. Um, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think the remaining cabinet appointees will make it through. And the reason I'm going out on a limb is because I know there's a lot of opposition to Tulsi Gabbard, Kash Patel, and RFK Jr. But I still think from this chart that I'm looking at right now, there'll be some scandal connected with it. There'll be some prolonged attacks because of the Venus Rahu conjunction. Rahu is also direct right now as we're looking at it. And some friends will actually turn around. But actually, in in terms of government, there will be some gains, but they'll be temporary. And the reason I'm saying they'll be temporary is because Rahu is involved. And the house of politics is the fifth house overall, and that Mercury is. So we're in for a contentious couple of weeks at least, and also some arguments within the government in terms of governmental authority, and also some judicial reversals on some of the executive orders, which have already occurred. But like I said, this is not only true in the United States, it's true in other countries, it's true in terms of uh, what recently happened in Colombia. There was a reversal. The government agreed to take back people. Then all of a sudden, when they tried to land the planes, they were turned back. So I think this will be interesting. This won't be resolved really until there's a major crack up in around April 15th of 2025. Um, and that'll clear out a lot of the opposition. Um, Venus will still be in that sign by that time. It'll be retrograde, I seem to recall. And so we'll see those things. So I'm not going to look at um well, let me just look at the US chart. Excuse me. And this is still the chart I trust the most. Right. So there's fighting over what's right and wrong with Jupiter in the sixth house. Um, there will be a disruption of the status quo with Rahu and Venus together in the fourth house. That's almost guaranteed. Um, K2 in the 10th house with Saturn. Yeah, major disruptions to the status quo over the next few months, at least until July. If we're looking at the Mahadashas, the United States is now in an Aries Mahadasha, so it's in a Mahadasha connected very strongly with politics, and it's Aries Leo. So that's Leo subperiods tend to be dangerous. So they can be dangerous to the leader, but they can also be dangerous to um, let's say the conventional running of things. Uh, and I think that basically you'll see a lot of changes over the next 3 to 4 months. Um, and but I think one of the things that's disturbing me the most is um, we're getting one side saying, well, this order will do this, and the other side saying this order will actually not do that, it will do this, and it will ruin everything. So again, it's really up to you as consumers of politics to determine which side you believe. Um, I think because of Saturn's disposition right now, um, and Jupiter's disposition right now, Jupiter I tends to favor Republicans, not because I think Republicans are more inherently generous than Democrats are, but because Jupiter is essentially um, more a planet connected um, with um, traditional or more um, trying to think of the right word to use, uh, more not really reform. Reform isn't the word I'm looking for. More connected with necessary change. Saturn is essentially uh, the planet connected with those who feel they've been disenfranchised or um, belong to the rural communities or belong to um, traditionally underrepresented communities, and that's who the Democrats uh, seem to always um, i- identify as their group or the group that work that they like to represent. Whereas the Republicans are usually represent a return to quote unquote traditional values. So that's why I make that pick. Also, Saturn's an older planet. The Democrat Republican Party, which became the Democratic Party, is an older party. So I tend to associate those more with Saturn. Um, and I work in a heavily Democratic state. Um, it's um, and I worked for a Democratic state, and the way they do things is it's very slow, it's very bureaucratic, it's very Saturnian. So it's so it makes sense to me. It may not make sense to you, but it makes sense to me. Right, I'm trying to get the dashes to change, but I really don't think I need them right now. Um, But using the Charadashas is kind of interesting because this does indicate a fall of certain people from power. Um, the Aquarius subperiod has aspects. So Mercury and Rahu are aspecting Aquarius. So this is a, a big lying period. Okay, a big untruthful period. Pisces comes next through February 10th, and Pisces has is affected by Saturn, Jupiter, Venus, Sun, and Mars. And so that can mean some advancement of enemies, some adherence to tradition. Aries will tend to, the Aries subperiod will tend to be more disruptive, more political. And by the time we get to the Virgo Mahadasha, I think you'll see some major changes, but they'll all be made before this Virgo Mahadasha comes into existence. So I'm just saying based upon the chart, based upon this particular chart. Now again, Trump will not get everything he wants. That's a given. Uh, the Democrats will not get everything they want. They don't have the numbers. The nominees, so essentially the rulerships of the country, people who oppose the rulerships of the country, um, will have a fight on their hands because Venus is exalted in this house. He is also the Lord of the sixth house in this chart. And I think one of the things that this causes is this is what perhaps gives the United States this litigious nature, the interest in engaging in lawsuits and the like. So let's go over here to the chart for everyday people. All right. So I'm going to talk about um, the actual signs and what they mean for individuals, what these placements mean for individuals. So again, this is actually somewhat, so starting with Aries, Aries is up here as it always is. So this is April 15th to May 15th. Jupiter's in the second house. The Lord is the Lord of the 12th house. This actually is kind of a money-saving combination, strong desire to save money, pressure to buy, but this will actually caution it a little bit. This will actually slow it down a little bit. Um, the other thing is you have Mars, you have Jupiter in the second house, so it should bring more money in for Aries. Mars is in the third house, more fulfillment of desires, but after a couple of attempts, because we have a couple of retrograde planets. Mars is retrograde, and usually not the best time to negotiate land deals or housing deals, but again, you can get some bargains with retrogrades. Uh, these are called the Ranada Lagna and the Upapada Lagna, and so essentially, the status of the sign will increase. The status of the children of this sign will increase. Um, K2's in the sixth house. Again, you have to be careful about illnesses. Seventh house Lord is in the 11th house. It will give, I'm sorry, yeah, seventh house Lord is in the 11th house. It will give gains and also likelies to relationship partners. Um, Sun and Mercury are in the 10th house. A lot of focus on career and career gains, but slowly. But again, this will put the brakes a little bit on spending. So that's good for Aries. For Taurus, Taurus has Jupiter in the first house. This isn't a bad placement at all. Jupiter rules the 11th house, but it can give conspiracies or um, delays or obstructions towards getting what this sign wants. The sign may be a little bit overly optimistic, given this placement. Mars is in the second house, so this sign will fight or argue to get what it wants. It won't hesitate to involve the children, to be honest. But ultimately, it will get what it wants in terms of the chart, in terms of career matters, steady. It'll be put into a leadership position, and it will get a lot. I get a lot of money, but arguments over relationship life are going to be common this week. For Gemini, Gemini has Mars in the first house. This is not a particularly great placement because Mars doesn't feel comfortable in Gemini. Um, it's really not Mercury's friend, and its placed, its dignity is as a friend, though, and I'll explain these ultimately when I get to these, but just take my word for it, Mars isn't well placed into the sign. Its aspect in K2, it can cause sudden outbursts of anger over past slights. And I think you may find people willing to argue over the smallest things with this combination with Gemini. It also does provoke some fear of lawsuits and also some fear of imprisonment, but that's not going to happen. Um, I think overall with this combination, K2's in the fourth house. There's a lot of anxiety, a lack of feeling of support. Sun and Mercury are in the eighth house, can indicate some bad um, image with the government. Saturn's in the ninth house, so as long as you don't panic, you'll do okay. And Venus is exalted in the 10th house, career-wise, and also in terms of any trouble with authority figures or any trouble with money, you'll come out okay. But again, like I said, the main element I would look at is fear of loss of status and also arguments. For Cancer rising, Cancer has um, Moon is in the ninth house in the chart, which is normally a good placement. Uh, it's with Venus, which is Lord of the 11th house of gains, and the fourth house, I'm sorry, the fifth house, I'm sorry, the fourth house of status. So there should be some good financial gains for this sign. But again, like I said, this sign is really re-examining its entire life right now, and we'll do so until March, when Saturn enters Pisces. And this is kind of an important transit for Cancer, just like it's an important transit for Aquarius and for Pisces. But I think what happens here is that that re-examination will happen. This sign will determine is probably focusing too much on relationships and too much on relationship partners trying to help in achieving its goals. And we'll look for more independence this month. Uh, Cancer, it's a favorable month for Cancer in terms of financial gains, but again, there can be a lot of fights. So both all three signs, Taurus, Gemini, and Cancer, should look out for unprovoked arguments. I think that's a danger for those signs, and also for um, Scorpio, Sagittarius, and one, two, three, and Pisces. So just keep that in mind. Those particular signs are going to be very sensitive to um, arguments, blow-ups, things like that. For Leo, Leo has the Lord of the First is in the sixth, so that indicates some contentiousness. with the government or with authority figures like bosses. Um, and I think overall this sign will tend to have good status. And K2 in the second house, again, some misunderstandings about what is being said or being what is being promoted. This actively affects Donald Trump's chart because K2 is in the first, is in the second house, so his house of speech. Um, Saturn, now again, this is not defending him, or just, a lot of things that Trump says. I can understand why people get upset about them, but again, this is a misunderstanding uh, placement. And Sun and Mercury are in the 11th house, so it makes the sign want to fight or want to argue. Saturn's in the seventh house. It will hold back progress and delays, yeah, but it will make partnerships loyal and dedicated and devoted to you. Eighth house, Lord, eighth house has Venus in it. This is actually a good placement, so it can give unexpected gains or unexpected moves from different quarters, although it can motivate a lot of women to side against you. And Jupiter's in the 10th house. That's actually really, really good, along with Mars in the 11th house. Malefic planets or difficult planets in the 11th house tend to be very good for success. For Virgo, K2 is placed in the first house, and you'll notice we don't have that underline under K2. So this is what's called a true node direct, stationary direct placement of K2. And they've been happening with a lot of frequency over the past few weeks. Um, and since these are mathematically calculated points, um, I find it interesting because the mathematically calculated corrections are coming pretty pretty frequently. But that also when Rahu and K2, I've noticed when Rahu and K2 go stationary direct, there are unexpected surprises. We've had the air crashes, right? We had two air crashes in a row within a week. Um, One which certainly is so the Washington air crash. I'm going to digress for a second to talk about the Washington air crash. Uh, and I think one of the things that happened, so I'll get back to Virgo in a second, but one of the things that happened is this is a sign connected with air travel. Both these crashes happened within a week of Saturn going direct. So that can mean a certain sloppiness. If I've noticed something about Saturn going direct, and that is it's really good for work, but if you held off on it on any commitments you made, all of a sudden they're pushed forward. If agency in charge of this has been understaffed, or if any procedures have been, so I'm not blaming anybody, I don't know, or if any procedures have not been followed to their fullest, that Saturn going direct will cause air crashes. Uh, Saturn is in Purvabhadra, Nakshatra. It's not in Sattavishak, which is normally associated with air travel. But also, this Rahu Moon Venus combination in Pisces is also not good for travel. And I think also the Mars aspect, this Mars retrograde aspect on this particular sign, if we use Rashi aspects, makes people just in general more accident prone. It makes air travel more accident prone. I did get a client ask me about whether or not it was safe to travel in the air during certain dates. Uh, but these events tend to be localized. They tend not to be spread all over the world. Uh, so although the number of cases that are under investigation, when the guy was on TV the other day, or was out, I was relaying the cases they have ongoing investigations of. it strikes me as being rather large. So I thought that was fascinating. So, and again, like I said, some people have said there's understaffing. So let's get back to the Virgo. My apologies for you Virgos out there who are waiting for your forecast. Um, Jupiter's aspecting the first house. It's retrograde, but it's still aspecting the first house. So it's Mars. So this sign will get a lot of responsibility, a lot of redoing of tasks. And I know it's hit me fairly strongly. That's not my rising sign, but I have a lot of important planets in Virgo. And so that particular sign, I've been kept busy the past few weeks and days. Um, and not really in a good way. I wish I could say it was in a good way, but not really in a good way. So I think that this combination, there'll be a lot of responsibility, a lot of aggression placed on this sign. The good thing is money will improve because we have Venus exalted and Jupiter is well placed for money acquisition. And finally, let's go over here. Sun and Mercury are in the fifth house, so that should give increased luck. And Saturn's in the sixth, increased determination to get work done. And Rahu, Venus, Moon in the seventh house, enhanced partnerships. Jupiter in the ninth, increased luck, but also increased work and increased expectation that work will be done extremely well. For Libra, Libra has Venus in the sixth house, which you would say is that's not really good. The sixth house isn't good, but it's the exalted Lord of the sign. It's the exalted Lord of the eighth house. So that can give financial benefits, financial improvement. Um, and also certain enemies coming around and becoming friends. Uh, Scorpio is, but again, this is temporary. Scorpio is in Scorpio's Lord is Mars, is placed in the ninth house. Uh, Better for gains from property, but not really right away, but maybe in a few months. Let's see now. The third house Lord is in the eighth house, so that can give, again, some unexpected financial gains. But again, it does make the person feel like their desires or ambitions are being thwarted to a certain extent. Sun and Mercury are in the fourth house. Um, there's a lot of focus on home life and relationship life. Saturn's in the fifth. Um, a lot of what you want to do is being delayed or obstructed. Venus is in the sixth. We've already spoken about this to a certain extent. Uh, and K2's in the 12th, so this can cause unexpected expenses. So not a bad week for Libra, but not the best. Um, for Scorpio, Scorpio has Jupiter in the seventh house. The Lord of the rising sign is Mars. Some say the co-lord is K2. I tend to um, only use that under certain circumstances. But Mars being in the eighth house does indicate the sign will feel a little bit trapped or a little bit constricted. Um, Sun and Mercury in the third house, good for communications. Rahu, Moon, and Venus are in the fifth house, so good for luck, good for children's luck, although children may seem to be a little bit greedy or obsessive. Seventh house Lord has Jupiter in it. That's good for financial gains. And Mars in the eighth, we've already spoken about that, so some relationship problems as well. K2's in the 11th, again, not until July should this sign trust his friends. For Sagittarius, Sagittarius has Jupiter in the sixth house. That's not necessarily a good placement, but it's not the worst. So it indicates through effort or study, you can progress and move further through persistence. Sun and Mercury are in the second house, good for financial gains. Saturn's in the third house, good for determination and overcoming obstructions. Moon, Venus, and Rahu, along with the Sri Lagna, are in the fourth house, so that should indicate some financial good news for this sign. Let's see now. Seventh house, I'm sorry, seventh house has Mars in it, so there will be some arguments or fights with relationship partners. And K2 is in the 10th house, so there will continue to be disagreements over um, work or policy, and again, a lack of attention being paid to the sign's needs. For Capricorn, Capricorn has Sun and Mercury in the first house. That's the eighth house lord. So again, some eighth and ninth house lord, eighth, ninth, and fifth house lord. So that can indicate some obstructions in terms of self-confidence, but financial gains and financial improvements through unexpected avenues. Saturn's in the second house. That tends to make the sign a little bit um, conservative financially, but usually it's beneficial. Moon and Venus are in the third house. Um, I have kind of a fear that crypto is going to be overvalued myself over the next few months. Just that's just a side note, and I think this combination will do it. So it's not that I'm against it as an investment, but I just think um, the attention being paid to it lately is making it will make it elevate a little bit too quickly. Uh, let's see now. Jupiter is in the fifth house. That's a good placement for financial growth, at least temporarily for this sign. Um, And let me get back to the individual sign for Capricorn. This Venus Rahu moon will make this sign very financially ambitious, so a little more reckless than it normally is. Um, Mars is in the sixth house, very strong-willed, very ambitious. Ketu's in the ninth house, some obstruction of luck, and some unexpected downturns in markets. For Aquarius, Saturn's in the first house. This isn't a bad placement. It gives the sign some autonomy, some leadership skills, some ability to improve itself. And but we do have the Sun and Mercury in the seventh house, so both there'll be problems with earnings from both parents and from spouse, and not from earnings from over expenditures from those individuals and spending more money than you want to. Um, the Moon Venus Rahu conjunction again will make this sign a little bit overly optimistic, I think. But again, it's if you can just bear with it for a few months and don't get too crazy with your spending, you'll do okay. Um, Jupiter's in the fourth house, a lot of activity in spending for the home. Mars is in the fifth house. So again, some fights with children or relationship partners. K2's in the eighth house, a lot of interest in metaphysical and spiritual subjects. That's it for Aquarius. For Pisces, Pisces has Rahu, Moon, Venus in the first house. So that's an exalted Venus in the first house. We also have the Sri Lagna there. So that indicates the focus of this sign will be money for this coming week. And Jupiter's in the third house. There'll be polite ways to make it. Fights with family, fights with a relationship partner. That also shows up. Sun K2 is in the seventh house. The relationship partners will seem a bit distant or a bit difficult. And Sun and Mercury sit in the 11th house, heading towards the 12th house. So there can be some improvement in finances within about 2 to 3 weeks. Saturn's in the 12th house, spending on necessary things, not fun things. Okay. So this isn't a bad chart this week. again, like I said, I just would be cautious about unrealistic optimism because of the Rahu Venus conjunction and also because of the Jupiter retrograde. So I'm not really, and also overreaction, emotional overreaction. I'm not really trying to find fault with the benefics, but I think they tend to make us careless. They make us think that everything comes easily, and some things do, but not everything. Okay, so it's always good to um, hope for the best, but you have to. So I'm going to close this window because the chart isn't doing what I want to do. Yeah, I'm going to open it again. This will take a second. Just a second. Okay, now chart. And like the astro mapping, you know, share the screen. All right, so this is where the action is happening right now. Still land problems and deception in Hawaii. Okay, that's still there. Uh, Even in Alaska, some land claims, and even in Western Canada, I'm still seeing that as a problem. Um, Venus, Rahu, and Saturn are hitting the west coast of Canada. So there can be some, I don't want to say economic downturn, but some economic confusion in that part of the country, also in Washington State and Oregon State, and also in California. There's a moon going through the Los Angeles area, so hopefully all the fires are going to be brought under control because the moon is an arid, is a watery planet, excuse me, not arid. So I know that um, the federal government has released some water. So um, that was done over protest. I understand that, but at least there will be some more water brought into the area. So that will cause perhaps another constitutional um, issue, but it's fascinating to see how these things are developing, but that's a crisis situation. Mars is running right through North Dakota, South Dakota, uh, let's see, now Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, right? Okay, and into Texas. So there is a very strong Mars line running through here. So this means we're going to be seeing not necessarily fires, but also in Canada and Mexico, not necessarily fires, but disruptions, maybe more gun violence, maybe more aggressive action taking place. This is also kind of where the immigration issues are starting to really come to a boil. So there may be fights or protests about that. There's a Mercury line running straight through, looks like Ohio and West Virginia, North and South Dakota, into Georgia and into Florida and Cuba and down close to, um, and so we have some Mercury, we have some line from the government. Okay, so this is Jupiter's running through New York City and So that economically, that part of the world looks optimistic, but especially as we get the sun down here, um, you'll start to see more misrepresentation of people's records over the next few weeks. And we have Sun Mercury line running through uh, Colombia, Ecuador, uh, Peru, touching Chile, but not quite. And there's a Jupiter and a Saturn line running through Rio de Janeiro and also through Guyana. So I'm probably pronouncing it incorrectly. I apologize. And also through Brazil. So this is and Venus Rahu line. So this will give some government scandals, some government um, restrictions coming from Brazil, especially hitting hard around Rio de Janeiro. There's a Venus Rahu line. There may be some flooding on the east coast of Brazil. There's a moon line running through the Azores down to uh, Cape Verde and also touching on the Madeiras. And I think that those parts of the world will have some bad weather patterns. Uh, I would say maybe excessive rainfall or maybe some. Not, I really don't want to say earthquakes, uh, but some panic. There's a Mercury line running through uh, basically Morocco into Libya into uh, down through Gabon and down all the way down to South Africa. And I think this indicates restrictive government actions and also attempts to cover them up. This is true for Spain, France, and Great Britain, or the UK as well, and even Ireland. Um, Germany is in a particularly difficult place between maintaining control. Sweden is as well between maintaining control and and trying to conserve their space. Um, there's a Jupiter-Saturn line passing through uh, basically area close to Ukraine and Eastern Europe, and that can bring some economic expansion. The Jupiter line is passing through Israel, which is a good sign, and also through Turkey. So that's a potentially good sign that uh, not necessarily that the peace will be lasting down there, but they are coming closer to an agreement. When Jupiter shrinks their conflict, I think that's within about another month or so. And Jupiter is going through Saudi Arabia, and there are some government problems down there. I know that. And also Saturn's going through Saudi Arabia as well, and down through Madagascar and Eastern Africa. So all those countries will have basically some financial issues and financial problems. There's a Venus Rahu line passing through Iran, also passing, also involving Afghanistan and Pakistan to a certain extent. And I think these two countries will have, or these three countries will have ongoing issues with each other. So will India, and there's a Mars line running through India. So I think India is going to have some press problems of its own, maybe even some economic problems of its own, and maybe even some governmental scandals. Uh, so Sri Lanka. The the other prominent lines, which indicate governmental suppression, are running through Myanmar and to a lesser extent, Laos and Cambodia and down into Indonesia. Um, Now, again, these don't necessarily have to mean suppression in the objective sense of throwing people in jail, but just trying to control communications. Okay, so that's more what I'm looking at. Uh, Japan has a Saturn line running through it, so there will be some restrictions on Japan's behavior. China is between a Saturn and a Sun line, so that government's trying to reestablish its authority. Vietnam is trying to reestablish its authority as well. And if here, the map just enlarged a little bit. Um, so Japan also has that descending Jupiter line running close to it, and so does the Philippines. So the Philippines should make out much better this coming week. And Indonesia should also make out better financially this coming week. Um, the other lines I'd like to draw your attention to, though, is the Saturn line is going through this part of Indonesia and also all the way down into Australia. So there are indications the economy is tightening in Australia and inflation is not yet fully abated there. And also in uh, Guinea, the there's a Mars line, so there could be some governmental protests in Australia, especially in Sydney. And if we move over towards Um, finally, our friends over to the in New Zealand, we have a Sun and Mercury line, so the government will be trying to um, clamp down on what it calls misinformation. And I'm deliberately um, using that term ironically because one person's misinformation is another person's truth, and vice versa. So I think um, when you're watching news, again, get it from multiple sources, get it from, I would recommend getting it from, um, you can believe whomever you want to believe. That's your business. But just given the planetary configurations, I wouldn't put it past anybody uh, to misrepresent themselves over the next 6 months or so. Yeah, it's that extreme. And and I I I also so I think what I'm trying to do is advise you that planetarily you should have um I would recommend, I won't say you should have, I would recommend getting information from multiple sources and then kind of sorting it out and figuring out who you think is correct and who you think is incorrect. Because I've seen a lot of statements thrown out over the past couple of weeks, which are really very suspect. And they've, um, I'm, I'm seeing a repeat of some of the misrepresentation I saw in 2017 to 2000, really all the way through 2024. There was a period there where people were actually humble. They actually had to stop and think about their audience. And I think that's slowly slipping away because the audience that likes what they're hearing has perhaps kicked back or they're trying to make themselves more relevant in the news cycle. And again, that doesn't mean I believe everything I hear from the other side either. It's I'm just trying to think. It's a juggling act. It's always been a juggling act with the media. Okay. With that Mercury Rahu conjunction in the United States eighth house, the media has always been more concerned with panicking us than with telling us the absolute truth. Okay, so that's just um, my perception as a former journalism major, and as and one of the reasons I didn't want to go into journalism. Okay, so that being that being said, I wish you all a wonderful week. There are some good opportunities for finding bargains, especially in property, especially in education. Okay, because Jupiter and Mars are both retrograde. But again, read the fine print, make sure you know what you're getting into. And I trust you all will have a wonderful week. I love you all. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. And again, did you make it to the end? If you did, congratulations. And thank you so much for watching. Again, I love you all. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. Bye, everyone. See you next week. Have a great week and go out there and do what you need to do in order to make yourselves happy. Okay? Bye bye.